What the hell? He just kissed her? Dwayne Ellington's voice sliced through the polished hallway like a crack of lightning. His tone, usually cool, calculated, measured, shook with something raw. Shock. Disbelief. Maybe even fear. But that moment, that impossible moment, came after everything Aaliyah Johnson had already endured that morning. It began 3 hours earlier. Aaliyah had arrived before dawn, as she always did, wearing her gray janitorial uniform and clutching a thermos of cheap coffee that tasted more like metal than caffeine. Her breath fogged in the frigid air as she swiped her badge and entered the private service elevator of Ellington Capital. Dolores, the housekeeper who had worked for the Ellington family for nearly 20 years, was already waiting at the penthouse level. Her back was ramrod straight, her eyes cold and appraising. "You're late," Dolores snapped. Aaliyah glanced at her watch. "It's 5:59, ma'am. My shift starts at 6. Don't talk back." Dolores shoved a bundle of cleaning cloths into her arms. "Mr. Ellington wants the marble buffed before the nanny arrives at 8, and all 3 guest rooms polished, and the laundry, and you'll be preparing the nursery for inspection." Aaliyah blinked. "Ma'am, that's usually split between 3 people, and..." Dolores stepped closer, her perfume sharp and oppressive. "Are you questioning my orders?" she hissed. "I'm just saying it might not be possible to finish before." Slap. The sound cracked through the hallway. Aaliyah stumbled, the sting exploding across her cheek, knees buckling as she hit the floor. "You people never listen," Dolores spat. "Be grateful you even have this job. Now get up." Aaliyah lifted trembling fingers to her cheek, her breath shuddering. I didn't mean disrespect, ma'am." "Then stop talking and start scrubbing." Dolores turned sharply, heels clacking across the marble as she walked away. Aaliyah swallowed hard, then pushed herself up using the wall for support. Her cheek throbbed, her pride stung even worse. But she forced herself to stand straight. She needed this job for Maya, for rent, for survival. So she worked, and worked, and worked. By 8, sweat darkened her uniform. Her arms ached, her knees felt like gravel from kneeling on the marble. Yet Dolores kept piling tasks onto her, criticizing every breath she took. But none of that, not the humiliation, not the slap, not the exhaustion, prepared her for the chaos she would witness next. Screaming erupted from the nursery. Not just screaming, shrieking, high-pitched and furious. Aaliyah froze at the top of the stairs. 2 women in glossy uniforms stood outside the nursery, both with their hair yanked loose, both wiping spit from their faces. "He spat on me," one cried. "He spat right in my eyes, and he bit me," the other sobbed. Inside the room, a toddler's wail echoed like a storm. A tiny boy, Trey Ellington, thrashed wildly, his face blotchy and red, fists tight, mouth open in a violent cry. One nanny tried to approach him. He spat at her too. Aaliyah's breath caught. She glanced around. Dolores was nowhere in sight. The nannies were retreating. No one dared step forward. Her cheek still burning from the earlier slap, Aaliyah gripped her cleaning cloth and took a shaky step toward the room. "Miss, don't," one nanny cried. "He hates everyone." But Aaliyah didn't stop. She knew that kind of cry. The kind born not just from anger, but from hurt. She stepped inside the nursery. The smell of baby lotion mixed with panic. Toys were scattered everywhere, blocks, picture books, a stuffed lion turned upside down. The walls were a gentle sky blue, but the air felt electric. Trey spotted her, his eyes wide, wet, furious, locked on her brown face, her plain uniform, her trembling hands. Aaliyah knelt slowly. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay, sweetheart." He screamed louder. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and began humming, soft, gentle, steady. A hymn her grandmother used to sing on long church nights in Georgia. A song older than her pain, older than the walls around her. And then, the impossible happened. Trey stopped screaming. His fists loosened. His tiny chest heaved, then steadied. His face softened as if the melody wrapped around him like warm cotton. He took one step, then another. The boy who had spat at every nanny walked straight toward her, lifted his trembling hands, and pressed his cheek to hers. Aaliyah's breath vanished. Her eyes burned. Her cheek, the one that had been slapped not even an hour earlier, felt something entirely different now. A small, innocent kiss. The doorway filled with stunned faces. 2 nannies, a security guard, a junior staffer holding a clipboard midair. And then, what the hell? He just kissed her? The deep voice behind them parted the crowd like a wave. Dwayne Ellington entered the room, tall, sharp, impossibly composed except for the shock widening his usually controlled blue eyes. He took in the scene, jaw tightening, not with anger, with something deeper. Something cracked open. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Aaliyah rose to her feet, still holding Trey, who refused to let go. "Aaliyah Johnson, sir," she whispered. "I'm the cleaning staff." Trey buried his face in her shoulder. The room held its breath. Dwayne stepped closer. "He's never done that before. Never. He hasn't let anyone touch him since." His voice broke. Just a little. Dolores appeared behind him, pale. She opened her mouth as if to twist the story, to reclaim control, but Dwayne lifted a hand. "Enough. Everyone out." The room emptied. Only he, Aaliyah, and Trey remained. For a long time, Dwayne stared first at Trey, then at the woman holding him, and something changed in his expression. Something unspoken, but unmistakably human. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Miss Johnson," he said, "I'd like to talk to you." Aaliyah's heart thudded, her cheek still stinging from earlier, the weight of Trey warm against her skin. This wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of something that none of them, especially her, could have seen coming. If this moment touched your heart, like the video and comment where you're watching from, maybe someone near you is watching too. The silence in the nursery was heavy, sacred even. Aaliyah stood still, arms gently wrapped around Trey, whose tiny fingers clutched her shirt as if she were the last safe place on earth. Dwayne Ellington hadn't moved. He leaned one hand against the edge of the changing table, his eyes flicking between his son and the woman who had somehow done what no expert, no therapist, and no nanny could do: calm the storm in Trey's heart. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment but not its weight. "Let's talk, outside." "Oh, go." Aaliyah nodded silently and followed him out into the hallway. Dolores was waiting near the grand staircase, her face still tense, watching every move like a hawk guarding its nest. She didn't say a word, but Aaliyah felt the sting of her glare sharp as the slap that still echoed on her cheek. Dolores knew something had changed, and she didn't like it. In the sitting room just past the kitchen, Dwayne gestured toward a leather armchair. "Please, sit." "It is." Aaliyah hesitated, glancing down at her worn cleaning shoes against the spotless hardwood floors. She didn't belong in spaces like this, rooms where the furniture cost more than her rent for a year. But she sat, careful to rest only on the edge. Dwayne remained standing. "I know this is unorthodox, and you probably didn't plan for any of this." "No, sir," she said quietly. "I came to mop floors." He gave a short laugh, but it wasn't mocking, just weary. "And somehow, you walked right through every wall my son's built since his mother died." Aaliyah lowered her eyes. "I didn't mean to interfere. I just heard him crying, and something in me couldn't walk away." "I'm glad you didn't," he said. Then after a beat, "He doesn't let anyone touch him. Not since the accident." Her eyes rose gently. "The accident?" He nodded, jaw tightening. "Last winter, my wife, Helena, was driving Trey to a routine checkup. It was snowing, black ice, the kind you don't see until it's too late." His voice thinned. "She didn't make it." "I'm sorry," Aaliyah whispered, sincere. He gave a stiff nod. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence heavy with stories unspoken. "Finally," he said, "I'd like to offer you a temporary role as Trey's live-in nanny." Aaliyah blinked. "Sir, I'm not qualified. I've never worked full-time with children. I don't have a license or certifications. I don't need a resume. I need results. And you're the only one who's gotten any. But what about your staff? The housekeeper?" "I'll handle Dolores." He cut in. "If she's made things difficult, it ends now." Aaliyah hesitated. Her cheek still carried the sting, the invisible bruise deeper than the skin. "With all due respect, sir, People like me don't just get offered jobs like this. Not in buildings like this. Not in penthouses that stretch into the sky. He folded his arms. Why not? She looked up, quietly but firmly. Because we're not supposed to be seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he stepped closer, his voice steady. Trey sees you. That's enough for me. The words hit her like a slow dawn. A warmth she hadn't expected. A space she didn't know she was allowed to enter. She nodded, still cautious. Okay, I'll try. I'll have Dolores prepare the guest room next to Trey's nursery, starting tonight. Yes. She stood, unsure of the proper etiquette. Should she shake his hand? Bow? Salute? She opted for a respectful nod, then turned to leave. As she reached the hallway, she nearly collided with Dolores, who was clearly eavesdropping from behind the wall. Watch yourself, the older woman muttered low, venom coiled in her voice. Don't start thinking you're anything more than what you are. Aaliyah didn't reply, not because she agreed but because Trey's soft voice behind her suddenly called out, Mama. Both women froze. Aaliyah turned. Trey stood in the nursery doorway, holding his stuffed lion, looking sleepy but determined. Dwayne appeared behind him, stunned. Did he just? Aaliyah stepped forward gently. No, baby, she said softly, kneeling. I'm Aaliyah. I'm just here to help. But Trey shook his head stubbornly and ran to her. Dolores's face was unreadable. Dwayne, however, looked like something had shifted inside him. Later that night, Aaliyah packed the few things she owned, a small suitcase with worn zippers and a framed photo of her parents holding baby Maya in a hospital room. She kissed her sister's forehead, whispered promises about sending money for groceries and rent, then took the long train ride back to Manhattan. When she returned to the penthouse, Dolores showed her the guest room. The sheets were stiff. The window looked out onto the skyline, but the view felt lonely. Aaliyah didn't complain. She unpacked, put the photo on the bedside table, and sat for a moment, letting the day settle over her like a coat she wasn't sure how to wear. Down the hall, Trey giggled. She heard it faintly, an echo of joy that had no business existing in a house that had been silent for so long. She stood and walked to the doorway of his room. Dwayne was reading him a story, but Trey kept peeking toward the door. Aaliyah smiled. Maybe, just maybe, the walls weren't so high after all. The guest room was quiet. Almost too quiet. Aaliyah lay on the edge of the bed, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. The sheets smelled of starch and something faintly citrusy. Nothing like home. A small nightlight glowed in the corner, casting soft shapes across the wall, and the distant hum of Manhattan buzzed just beyond the thick glass window. She couldn't sleep. Not because she wasn't tired, her muscles ached from cleaning, and her mind reeled from the weight of the day, but because something inside her refused to believe it was real. That she was here. That the son of a billionaire had chosen her, of all people, to calm his heart. And that someone, Dwayne Ellington, had offered her a role in his world, if only temporarily. She shifted slightly and turned to the nightstand. The photo of her parents and baby Maya smiled back at her. Her mother's eyes were soft, her father's hands large but tender. They were the kind of people who believed in doing right, even when it cost everything. She missed them deeply. She whispered, I hope I'm doing something good. Just then, a soft thump echoed from the hallway. She sat up, listening. Another thump, then a shuffle. She stood, slid her feet into the house, slippers left for her, and crept into the hallway. The nursery door was ajar. Inside, Trey stood barefoot, half awake, tears staining his cheeks, holding his stuffed lion by one leg. Sweetheart? She whispered. He looked up, lip trembling. Mama, he whimpered again. Her heart twisted. She walked slowly into the room and knelt beside him. It's okay, she said, brushing back a curl from his forehead. You're safe. I'm here. He reached out and clutched her hand tightly. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers with desperation that went deeper than any tantrum. It was grief, confusion, a longing for comfort. She glanced at the crib. You want me to stay until you fall asleep? He didn't answer, just pulled her toward the crib. She sighed softly, then sat down on the nursery chair beside it and began to hum the same melody she'd sung that morning. Low, soft, almost like a prayer. Trey climbed into the crib on his own, laid down, still gripping her fingers through the slats. Within minutes, his breath slowed, his chest rose and fell in a gentle rhythm. As she hummed, her eyes grew heavy too, and for a moment, her cheek rested on the rail of the crib. She didn't mean to drift, but the calmness of the room, the warmth of the little hand in hers, it was too much peace to resist. She dozed there, half sitting, her body slumped awkwardly, but her heart finally still. That's how Dwayne found them. He had returned from a late-night conference call in his home office, his tie loosened, the collar of his dress shirt slightly wrinkled. He had gone to check on Trey, as he always did before going to bed, but this time, he paused in the doorway. The light from the hallway fell softly across the scene, his son asleep, fingers entwined with the young woman slumped beside him. Aaliyah's braid had slipped over her shoulder, her face serene even in sleep. She looked peaceful, present, real. Dwayne's throat tightened. It had been so long since the house held this kind of stillness. Not silence, he had plenty of that, but real stillness. The kind that came when a child felt safe, when someone cared not out of obligation, but out of instinct. He walked away without a sound. The next morning, Aaliyah woke with a stiff neck and a soft blanket draped over her shoulders. She blinked, realizing she was no longer in the chair. She had been moved gently, carefully to the small couch in the corner of the nursery. Someone had given her a pillow. The blanket smelled faintly of cedar and something distinctly masculine. She sat up, startled, just as Dolores walked in carrying a breakfast tray. "Well, look who made herself at home," Dolores said, her tone sharp but edged with something else, uncertainty. Aaliyah sat up straighter. I didn't mean to fall asleep in here. Doesn't matter now," Dolores muttered. She placed the tray on the dresser. "Scrambled eggs, toast, fruit." Mr. Ellington said, "You're to be given meals. Fresh. In your room. 3 times a day." Aaliyah's eyebrows rose. "He said that?" Dolores didn't answer, only gave a curt nod and walked out, her shoes clicking down the hall. Aaliyah glanced at the tray. She couldn't remember the last time someone made breakfast for her. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. As she finished the last of the orange slices, a knock came at the door. Trey stood there in his tiny pajamas, holding his lion upside down again. "Hi," Aaliyah said, smiling. He waddled in, and without hesitation, climbed onto the couch and into her lap. Dwayne appeared moments later, coffee mug in hand. He leaned against the doorframe, watching the two of them. "I hope the accommodations were okay," he said lightly. She smiled, gently stroking Trey's back. "They were more than okay. Dolores said you slept in the nursery. I didn't plan to. He needed someone, and you were there," he said quietly. Aaliyah nodded. He sipped his coffee, watching Trey nestle into her side. "This house," he said, "hasn't had laughter in a long time." She looked up, her voice soft. "Sometimes it just needs a little lullaby." Dwayne stared at her for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he nodded. "Finish your breakfast. I'll have the driver take you and Trey to Central Park later. He needs the fresh air." She blinked. "You're trusting me already?" He gave a faint smile. "He already has." And with that, he walked away. Central Park in February was no place for laughter. The trees were bare, their branches stretching toward a colorless sky, and the wind sliced through scarves and wool coats like glass. Still, there was something oddly comforting in the stillness, the kind of quiet that reminded Aaliyah of Sunday mornings back home, when the world paused just long enough for people to breathe. The Ellington car, a sleek black Range Rover, waited by the south entrance. A driver opened the door for her as if she'd always belonged in the back seat of a Billionaire's vehicle. Not behind a mop, Trey sat beside her in a navy puffer jacket and beanie, a tiny bundle of curiosity. His lion toy rested in his lap. He said nothing but looked out the window the entire ride, eyes wide as the city passed by. When they reached the park, the driver nodded politely. "I'll be nearby if you need anything, ma'am." She blinked. "Oh, thank you." It still felt strange being called ma'am, being chauffeured like someone important. But Trey tugged at her coat, drawing her attention back to what mattered. They stepped out together, his little hand in hers, his pace cautious but eager. For almost an hour, they walked along the frozen lake, watched ducks paddle through slush, and stopped for hot chocolate from a vendor whose breath fogged with every sentence. Trey didn't speak, but his hand never left hers. And then, the air changed. A black town car pulled up along the curb. The kind of car that whispered money without needing to shout. A woman stepped out, dressed in a long gray coat and leather gloves, sunglasses perched high despite the lack of sun. Aaliyah recognized her instantly from the framed photo in Trey's nursery. Victoria Hale, Helena's older sister. Trey stiffened. Aaliyah instinctively tightened her grip on his hand. "Well," Victoria said, her voice smooth as glass but twice as sharp. "So you're the one." Aaliyah straightened. "I'm sorry?" Victoria removed her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were blue, cold, and thoroughly unimpressed. "The maid who sings lullabies." "I'm Trey's temporary nanny," Aaliyah said calmly. Victoria gave a dry laugh. "Of course you are. And I'm the Queen of England." Aaliyah glanced down at Trey, who had pressed himself into her side. "You're scaring him." "I'm his aunt," Victoria snapped. "He's family." "Then maybe don't talk like a stranger." The words were out before Aaliyah could catch them. Too blunt. Too honest. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose it's easy to speak freely when you're sleeping in penthouses and being fed by silver spoons you didn't earn." Aaliyah kept her tone even. "I never asked for any of this. I'm just here to care for him." "Right," Victoria said, tilting her head. "And I'm sure the extra zeros on your paycheck mean nothing to you." "I haven't been paid anything yet." That made Victoria pause just for a second. Then she stepped closer. "Listen, little girl," she said, lowering her voice. "I see through your game. I've seen your type before. You worm your way into the lives of lonely men and traumatized children, pretending to help. But it's always about one thing. Access." Aaliyah's spine straightened. "I didn't come here for access. I came to clean. Trey found me." Victoria sneered. "How convenient." She leaned down, brushing a finger across Trey's coat like it belonged to her. "I'll be watching," she whispered. Trey pulled back instinctively, burying his face in Aaliyah's coat. That was enough. Aaliyah turned, clutching the boy close, and walked away without another word. Her boots crunched over the icy path. Her hands shook not with fear, but anger. Righteous, protective, pulsing anger. The driver opened the car door when he saw her coming. "Back to the house, ma'am?" "Yes," she said curtly. Now, Trey didn't let go of her for the entire ride home. That evening, Aaliyah found herself in the kitchen, making a small bowl of oatmeal with honey and cinnamon. It was something Maya had always liked when she had trouble sleeping. A ritual of sorts. Comfort food with a memory attached. Trey sat at the table in his pajamas, cheeks still pink from the wind. He wasn't crying, but he hadn't smiled either, not since Victoria. As Aaliyah stirred the oats on the stove, she heard footsteps behind her. Dwayne entered, his shirt sleeves rolled, no tie, hair slightly tousled. He looked tired, but his eyes sharpened when they landed on Trey. "Dolores said you ran into Victoria today," he said quietly. Aaliyah didn't turn. "Yes, sir. And how did it go?" "She's concerned," Aaliyah said, keeping her tone neutral. "But I'm not sure her concern is really about Trey." Dwayne sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Victoria's always been intense, controlling." "She scared him," Aaliyah said. He looked over at his son, quiet now, curled in the chair with his lion in one hand, a spoon in the other. "I'll talk to her." "She won't listen," Aaliyah said. "She doesn't see Trey. She sees a legacy, an asset, something to protect, not someone to love." He turned sharply toward her. "You're very direct." "Ope." She met his gaze. "So are you." A beat passed. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. He didn't cry once today. That's the longest he's gone without a tantrum since. He stopped. Since Helena. Aaliyah walked over and placed the bowl of oatmeal in front of Trey. The boy dug in without hesitation. She turned back to Dwayne. "He doesn't need perfection," she said softly. "He just needs presence." He studied her for a long moment. "I'd like you to stay on," he said. "Not just temporarily. As long as Trey wants you here." "I'll stay," she said quietly. "As long as he needs me." Dwayne nodded. Then, almost as an afterthought. Victoria won't be a problem. But Aaliyah didn't believe that, because people like Victoria didn't disappear. They circled, they plotted, and they waited. The next morning began with the hush of a sleeping city, and the faintest glow of sun creeping through sheer white curtains. Aaliyah stirred from her sleep in the guest room, surprised by how well she had rested. For the first time in months, she hadn't dreamt of being chased by overdue bills, or of Maya calling out for help, or of herself scrubbing floors into the early hours. It was quiet, safe. She sat up, brushed her hair back, and padded across the room to open the window just a crack. Cold air filtered in, along with the soft sounds of a city beginning to stretch awake horns, distant footsteps, and the whoosh of cabs below. She turned and caught her reflection in the glass. She looked different, still her, but steadier, more grounded. After a quick shower, she dressed in a warm, casual sweater and jeans clothes. Dolores had reluctantly pulled from storage and left neatly folded at her door, without a note. Aaliyah appreciated the gesture, even if it came wrapped in ice. When she walked into the kitchen, Trey was already seated at the island, a sippy cup in hand, watching a squirrel through the glass wall that faced the garden. Dolores stood at the counter arranging toast like it was an art installation. "Good morning," Aaliyah said softly. Dolores didn't turn. "The child woke up at 6. He was asking for you." Trey turned, smiled, and reached for her. Aaliyah walked over and scooped him into her arms. "Hey there, sunshine." Dolores sniffed. "He refused breakfast until I played your singing from the monitor." Aaliyah blinked. "What monitor?" "The baby monitor," Dolores said, finally turning. "Mr. Ellington had it installed when he first moved in. Said it helped him sleep." Hearing Trey breathe, her eyes narrowed. "Now he listens to you, too." Aaliyah didn't answer. She turned her attention to Trey, who nestled against her shoulder like it was the most natural place in the world. Breakfast was easy. Warm oatmeal, berries, soft pancakes. Aaliyah fed Trey slowly, chatting softly to him about the day ahead. Maybe a walk in the garden, a drawing session in the sunroom, or baking cookies together. He didn't speak, but his fingers played with the edge of her sleeve the whole time. Later, while Dolores cleaned the kitchen, Aaliyah and Trey settled on the floor of the nursery with crayons and thick white paper. Trey drew circles, crooked and scattered, each one more confident than the last. Aaliyah sat beside him, humming a soft gospel tune under her breath. That's when she noticed an old frame tucked between books on the bottom shelf. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a photo. Helena Ellington, young, vibrant, laughing, holding baby Trey in her lap, her hair golden, caught in motion by the wind. She looked straight at the camera, full of life. Aaliyah's throat tightened. Trey reached for the frame. "Mama," the word was clear, soft, but unmistakable. Aaliyah looked up. "Trey? Did you just?" He touched the glass. His finger traced his mother's face. Aaliyah placed the photo in his lap gently. "She loved you very much, didn't she?" Trey looked up, eyes shimmering. Then he did something unexpected. He stood, shuffled over to his crib, and pulled out the lion toy. He brought it back and placed it next to the photo. Like an offering, Aaliyah felt a lump rise in her throat. She wiped her eyes just as a shadow passed by the open nursery door. Dwayne. He had been standing there, unseen, for who knew how long. He stepped inside, his voice hushed. "I forgot that picture was still here. I found it on the shelf," Aaliyah said softly. Trey called her Mama. Dwayne's jaw clenched. He hasn't said that word since the funeral. There was silence between them. "I'm sorry," Aaliyah said. "If this upset him—" "No," Dwayne interrupted, gently. "It didn't. He needs to remember her. I do too." She looked at him then, not as a billionaire, not as her employer, but as a man. One who was trying to raise a child while shouldering the grief of a home that used to be full. A man who still slept with ghosts in the hallway. "You loved her," Aaliyah said. "Not a question." "Deeply," he said. "And I failed her." Aaliyah shook her head. "You didn't fail anyone. You're still here. Still trying. That counts more than you think." He met her eyes. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Trey broke the silence by crawling into her lap again. Dwayne watched the scene with a softness Aaliyah hadn't seen in him before. "He's different with you. I don't know why," she said honestly. "I didn't do anything special. You listened," he said. "That's more than most people ever do." That afternoon, the mood in the house lifted slightly. Trey giggled as Aaliyah chased him through the hallway on all fours, pretending to be a lion. Dolores watched with pursed lips, pretending to be annoyed, but Aaliyah swore she saw a ghost of a smile. Dwayne even joined them for dinner. It wasn't formal. No suits. No speeches. Just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans served family style on the kitchen island. Trey sat beside Aaliyah, eating carefully, even offering her a piece of his biscuit. Dwayne sipped wine slowly. "This feels normal," he said. "It is," Aaliyah said. "Or maybe it's what normal is supposed to feel like." He smiled faintly, nodding. After Trey was asleep, Aaliyah passed by the study. Dwayne sat behind his desk, typing slowly on his laptop. She knocked gently. "Hey," she said. "He's down for the night." He looked up. "Thank you, Aaliyah." "For what?" "For giving my son a reason to smile again." She swallowed. "He's giving me something too." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "A place to belong." And with that, she left him there alone with his thoughts and a flicker of something new taking root in the corners of his grief. The sun rose reluctantly the next morning, its pale light barely cutting through the fog that blanketed the upper levels of the Ellington Tower. The skyline beyond the windows looked like a city half asleep, suspended in gray. Inside the penthouse, however, warmth bloomed through the scent of coffee, the sizzle of bacon, and the soft giggles of a toddler now accustomed to joy. Aaliyah stood in the kitchen barefoot, dressed in a navy sweater and black joggers, flipping pancakes while Trey sat at the island, thumping his lion against the granite countertop like it was a drum. Dolores watched from the corner with arms folded and one skeptical eyebrow permanently raised, but she said nothing. Ever since Dwayne had given Aaliyah full authority with Trey, Dolores's usual biting remarks had turned into measured silence. "Want blueberries in yours?" Aaliyah asked Trey. He nodded eagerly, his curls bouncing, eyes wide with anticipation. "Coming right up." She slid the pancake onto a plate, added a few extra berries, and handed it to him with a smile. He beamed. A knock on the penthouse door shattered the peaceful morning. Dolores turned quickly. "It's too early for guests." "ID to." Aaliyah watched as Dolores crossed the room and opened the door only to freeze in place, her spine going rigid like someone had just ordered her at military attention. Then came the click. Heels. Sharp, designer, unapologetic heels. And the scent, musky floral, expensive, heavy in the air before the woman even spoke. "Good morning," came a cool, clipped voice. "I assume my presence wasn't expected." Deeper vens. Aaliyah stepped around the corner to see Victoria Hale, again in full regalia. Tailored winter white coat, silk scarf knotted precisely, lipstick a deep red that looked more weapon than makeup. She pulled off her gloves one finger at a time and smiled thinly when she spotted Aaliyah. Trey immediately shrank behind Aaliyah's leg. "Aw," Victoria said, eyeing the boy. "Still shy, I see." Aaliyah crouched slightly. "It's okay, baby. We're just going to stay right here, all right?" Dwayne's voice echoed from the hallway. "Victoria." He appeared, barefoot, tie undone, clearly not expecting his sister-in-law before 9 a.m. "To what do we owe the pleasure? I thought I'd stop by." "Unannounced." "Yes, I know. But isn't family always welcome?" Dwayne's jaw tensed. "You've never come unannounced before. What's going on?" Victoria stepped into the penthouse like she owned it, her eyes sweeping over the polished floors, the fresh-cut flowers on the console, the breakfast dishes on the counter, and Aaliyah, especially Aaliyah. "I was reading the Chronicle this morning," she said, casually pulling a folded newspaper from her handbag. "Looked what made page 6. She laid the paper on the counter, a grainy photo taken from a distance. Aaliyah and Trey walking in Central Park, his hand in hers, her smile unmistakable. "New nanny, new love," Victoria quoted the headline aloud. "Ellington spotted with mystery woman and toddler. Insiders question how close is too close." Dwayne's face darkened. "This is trash," Victoria shrugged. "Perception is power, Dwayne." especially when your entire board is watching your every move. You bring this woman into your home, no vetting, no qualifications, and suddenly you're playing happy family in the tabloids? I don't care what the tabloids say. Well, the board does. And if they start to question your judgment? She didn't finish the sentence, but the threat lingered like smoke. Aaliyah didn't move. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she knew this wasn't her moment. This wasn't her battlefield. Victoria turned to her, smile chilling. Would you give us a moment, Miss Johnson? Dwayne opened his mouth to speak, but Aaliyah nodded calmly. Of course. She guided Trey gently down the hallway toward the nursery, feeling his little fingers tighten around hers. I don't like her, he whispered. Aaliyah knelt, surprised. You remember her? He nodded, eyes serious. She makes your voice go quiet. Aaliyah felt a knot in her throat. It's okay, baby. She can't take anything from us. It is bracked. In the kitchen, Victoria stood facing Dwayne like a prosecutor before the verdict. I'm not here to fight, she said, almost convincingly. I'm here because I care about Trey. You care about appearances, he said bluntly. I care about the family name. About the fact that people are whispering. About what happens when Child Protective Services starts asking questions again. About custody. Dwayne's shoulders stiffened. Don't you dare threaten that. I'm not threatening, she said. I'm warning. Your judgment is clouded, Dwayne. You're not yourself. You're still grieving. And now you've attached yourself to some girl you barely know. I know enough to trust her with my son. You trust her? Victoria laughed bitterly. She was scrubbing your floors 3 days ago, and now she's the only reason Trey is laughing again. Victoria went still. That fact, that undeniable truth, was a crack in her armor. Dwayne's voice lowered. You can posture, and you can posture all you want. But you saw it, Victoria. You saw how he hid behind her. He knows who's safe. Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked toward the front door, gloves already halfway on. You're letting your emotions run your house, she said. Just don't be surprised when it all comes crashing down. Then she was gone. Aaliyah waited until Trey fell asleep during story time before returning to the kitchen. Dwayne stood at the island, the newspaper still there. I'm sorry, she said gently. He looked up. For what? For all the attention. I didn't mean to cause problems. You didn't. He walked around the counter and leaned against the island. You've done nothing but bring peace into this house. That woman brings storm clouds wherever she walks. She won't stop. No, he said. She won't. Aaliyah hesitated. So, what now? He looked at her, and for a moment, the cool billionaire exterior melted away. Now, he said, we hold the line. Snow began to fall that evening. Soft at first, then thicker flakes tumbling through the Manhattan sky like whispers. Aaliyah stood by the tall nursery window, watching the light from the street lamps catch on each drifting flake, while Trey snored gently behind her, curled up with his lion and a navy fleece blanket. She pressed her hand to the cold glass. Victoria's words still echoed in her mind, curling into the corners of her piece like smoke under a door. She makes your voice go quiet, Trey had said. He wasn't wrong. People like Victoria didn't shout. They smothered. With smiles, with status, with threats dressed as warnings. Aaliyah turned away from the window. She'd grown up hearing voices like that. In grocery stores, at school meetings, in job interviews, voices that said, we're not saying you don't belong, we're just saying we already have someone for that spot. She wouldn't let Trey grow up afraid of those voices. Not if she could help it. She slipped out of the nursery and found Dolores in the hallway, muttering to herself while straightening a vase of tulips. Where's Mr. Ellington? Aaliyah asked. In the study, Dolores replied curtly. Where else would he be after being threatened by the ghost of Christmas lawsuits? Aaliyah blinked. Did you just make a joke? Dolores straightened up and gave her a look. Don't get used to it. Aaliyah walked quietly toward the study and knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open slightly. Dwayne sat at his desk. Laptop closed. His tie on the floor. A half-empty glass of scotch in his hand. His shoulders were hunched forward, hands clasped tightly, as if holding something invisible together. You okay? She asked softly. He didn't look up. What do you think? She stepped inside, careful not to intrude, and sat across from him. The fireplace behind him cast a low amber glow, dancing shadows across the room. She's not going away, is she? Aaliyah said. He shook his head. No. Victoria's always been like this. Strategic. Cold. But now she smells blood. She thinks she can use public opinion, the board, and even family court to make a move. Aaliyah leaned forward. You really think she'd try to take custody? She's threatened before. After Helena died. Said I wasn't stable enough. That Trey needed a maternal influence. Aaliyah's lips tightened. And now she sees me as that only, not the kind she can control. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion but sharp with clarity. Exactly. Was. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the soft tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then Aaliyah asked the question that had been burning in her gut all day. Why are you fighting so hard to keep me here? Dwayne was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, raw. Because Trey chose you. And because I trust you. She swallowed. Even with everything in the papers? He looked at her fully now. Especially then. You haven't asked for anything. You haven't tried to impress me. You didn't even want this job. You just showed up and everything started to get better. His words settled over her like snowfall. Quiet, heavy, real. I can leave, she said, though the words felt like broken glass in her mouth. If it protects Trey, if it makes things easier for you. Dwayne stood, walked around the desk, and leaned against it, arms folded. That's the difference between you and Victoria. She plays chess with people. You protect them. He paused. You're not going anywhere. Just then, the study door opened without a knock. Dolores. She held a white envelope in her hand, her expression tight. This just arrived by courier, from Hale and Thatcher Law Group. Dwayne took it, eyes narrowing. He opened the envelope, pulled out a single page, his jaw clenched. Aaliyah leaned in. What is it? A formal petition, he said, voice dark. Victoria has filed an emergency request for a court hearing. She's challenging my custody of Trey, claiming I've created an unstable environment by allowing an unlicensed, unvetted woman to act as his primary caregiver. He stared at the paper like it might catch fire. Aaliyah went still. That's fast. She doesn't play fair, Dwayne muttered. She plays to win. Aaliyah's hands tightened in her lap. So, what do we do? He looked up at her, something fierce igniting behind his eyes. We prepare. Aye. By the next morning, the penthouse was buzzing. Dwayne's legal team, usually reserved for boardroom deals and investment contracts, now had a war room set up in the formal dining area. Laptops, binders, coffee cups, and calendars filled every inch of the polished mahogany table. Aaliyah kept her distance, caring for Trey while the adults plotted battle. But she overheard the snippets, child psychologist testimony, Victoria's influence on the board, optics, 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 and for God, the word rang in her ears like a siren. Optics. It didn't matter how much Trey laughed with her, or how he ran to her every morning. It only mattered how it looked. Mid-morning, while Dwayne was on a call, Aaliyah pulled Dolores aside in the kitchen. Tell me honestly, she said. Do you think I should go? Dolores, surprised, dropped a spoon into the sink with a clang. You serious? I'm not trying to win anything here. I just want what's best for that boy. Ire. Dolores gave her a long look, then muttered, Sit down. Aaliyah sat. Dolores took a slow breath, something close to vulnerability flickering in her voice. I've worked for this family longer than you've been alive. I held Trey when he was 3 days old. I watched Helena run this house with a voice like honey and a spine of steel, and I watched Dwayne fall apart after the accident. She paused. And I've never not once seen that boy laugh like he does with you. Aaliyah swallowed. So, Dolores said, eyes narrowing. If you even think about walking away, I will personally slap the sense back into you. And this time, it won't be out of spite. It'll be out of love. Aaliyah blinked. You care? Dolores rolled her eyes. Don't get soft on me. Later that evening, Aaliyah sat with Trey in the nursery. He was sleepy but anxious, his little hands fidgeting as she read from a picture book. Tomorrow's a big day, she whispered. But you don't have to worry, okay? You've got an army now. He rested his head on her shoulder. In the doorway, Dwayne stood watching. You ready? He asked softly. Aaliyah looked up, her voice steady. Yes, because when the storm comes, you don't run, you hold the line. The courtroom was colder than Aaliyah had expected, not in temperature, but in tone. Everything about it felt detached, clinical. Polished wood floors, gray walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like flies in a jar. It smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and old fear. She sat on the far left bench, hands folded tightly in her lap, dressed in the navy blue suit Dolores had picked out for her, nothing flashy, but firm, respectful, the kind of outfit that said I belong here, even if her shaking knees begged to differ. Trey wasn't with her, of course. He was home with Dolores and a family friend, tucked safely away from the proceedings. But the boy's lion toy rested in her tote bag like a quiet reminder. You're here for him. Across the aisle sat Victoria Hale, spine arrow straight, draped in charcoal gray and pearls, her posture impeccable, her eyes calm and predatory. Her attorney, a silver-haired man named Carlton Grant, stood beside her, flipping through files like this was just another Tuesday. Dwayne sat beside Aaliyah, one hand on his knee, the other gripping a pen. He hadn't spoken much that morning, but his presence was solid, anchoring. Even when the court officer called, "All rise," and the Honorable Judge Gloria Penfield entered, he didn't waver. Judge Penfield was in her 60s, stern-faced, with reading glasses that sat low on her nose and a voice like thunder trapped in velvet. "Be seated," she said, glancing over the courtroom. "Let's proceed." Carlton was the first to speak. "Your Honor, we are here today to petition for an emergency custody hearing on behalf of Miss Victoria Hale, the child's maternal aunt. We are deeply concerned about the current emotional and physical environment in which young Trey Ellington is being raised." Aaliyah held her breath. "Mr. Ellington has, in recent weeks, employed a domestic worker with no childcare credentials to act as the child's primary caregiver. This woman, with no formal psychological training, no nanny certification, and no background checks conducted through state-approved channels, has been seen escorting the child through public areas of New York City, unaccompanied by any licensed guardian." A low murmur buzzed from the courtroom benches. Carlton paused. "We are not here to disparage Miss Johnson's character. But optics matter, and the safety and mental health of a grieving child are not subjects for experimentation." Dwayne leaned slightly forward. "May I speak, Your Honor?" Judge Penfield nodded. "Proceed." "I am not experimenting," Dwayne said clearly. "I am surviving. And so is my son." He stood now, hands loose at his sides, voice calm but steeled. Trey stopped speaking after Helena's death. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. He rejected every therapist, every nanny until Aaliyah. She was never hired to raise him. She was cleaning floors, and yet, somehow, he chose her. He spoke his first word in nearly a year with her beside him. He paused, then looked at the judge with a quiet intensity. "If loving a child without a license is a crime, then I guess we're all guilty at some point." Carlton rose. "That may be emotionally compelling, but," Judge Penfield held up a hand. "Mr. Grant, I've raised 3 children. I assure you, emotional compelling arguments do matter in cases involving minors." Carlton nodded stiffly and sat. The judge turned to Aaliyah now. "Miss Johnson, please step forward." Aaliyah rose slowly and walked to the center of the room. Her heart pounded in her ears. She looked at the judge, at the seal behind her, at Victoria's cold stare just beyond the bench, and finally at Dwayne, who gave her the faintest of nods. "Miss Johnson," the judge began, "are you currently certified in any form of childcare?" "No, ma'am," Aaliyah replied calmly. "I'm not. Do you have CPR training?" "I do now, Mr. Ellington had me certified last week." "And do you love this child?" The question landed like a thunderclap. Aaliyah blinked, her voice suddenly soft. "Yes, I do. I didn't plan to. I didn't walk into that penthouse looking to be anyone's savior. I came for a job, any job. But Trey found me. He sat beside me when I was scrubbing floors. He cried in my arms before he ever said a word. And now, he sings. He laughs. He sleeps through the night. Her voice broke slightly. I can't explain what we have, but I know I'd protect him with my life. Judge Penfield leaned back. Victoria stood now, rising like a statue. Your Honor, this woman is emotionally entangled. She is blurring the line between employee and family. Aaliyah turned. I am family. The room went silent. Victoria blinked. Aaliyah stepped forward just one pace. Not by blood, but by choice. Isn't that what family should be? The judge raised an eyebrow. Victoria's voice sharpened. And how long do you plan to play house with the Ellingtons? Until you're promoted from nanny to wife? Dwayne stood instantly. That's enough. Judge Penfield banged her gavel once. Order. Victoria sat, her expression unrepentant. The judge turned to Aaliyah again. One final question. Would you continue to care for Trey even if Mr. Ellington no longer employed you? Even if it meant no pay, no security, no guarantee? Aaliyah didn't hesitate. Yes. When basically. The judge stared at her a moment, then looked to her clerk. I'd like a full psychological evaluation for Trey, conducted within 10 business days. I will not issue a change of custody at this time. Carlton started to object, but the judge raised her hand. However, she added, I am ordering a follow-up hearing in 3 weeks, and during that time, Miss Johnson is to remain in the home under observation by a court-appointed child advocate. The 7D duck stub. Aaliyah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The gavel came down. Court adjourned. Back at the penthouse. The mood was strange. Not celebratory. Not solemn. Just quiet. Dwayne poured 2 glasses of wine in the study and handed one to Aaliyah. You were incredible today, he said. I was terrified, she admitted. You didn't look it. They sat by the fire. Aaliyah glanced out the window, where the snow had stopped. The city looked freshly made. She's not done, she said. No, Dwayne agreed. But neither are we. He raised his glass. She met it. To Trey, he said. To holding the line, she added. They clinked glasses in silence, and the war was far from over. 2 days after the courtroom standoff, the penthouse returned to a version of its new normal. Aaliyah's morning started with the soft thud of Trey's footsteps outside her door, followed by his quiet knock, never loud, never demanding, just a gentle tap, like a reminder that she was needed, wanted, and no longer invisible. She'd greet him with a smile, a hug, and his lion toy, then lead him into the kitchen where breakfast routines now included Trey pointing to ingredients, and Aaliyah guessing wrong on purpose just to make him giggle. But even within the warmth of these new rituals, a shadow loomed. The court-appointed child advocate was due any day now. Her name was Margaret Sutter, a former social worker with the city, known for her no-nonsense approach, zero tolerance for manipulation, and a particular sensitivity to cases involving inappropriate boundaries. Translation: she was here to look for mistakes, not to build bridges. That morning, Dolores stood at the foyer mirror adjusting her brooch like she was going to meet royalty. She's punctual, she warned, and she doesn't like clutter or excuses. Kazan. Aaliyah straightened her blouse and gently fixed Trey's collar. So no lion on the dining table? Absolutely not. Trey pouted. Aaliyah knelt and whispered, You can hide him under your chair. I won't tell. He grinned and tucked the plush toy into his hoodie pocket. At exactly 10 a.m., the elevator pinged, and the steel doors parted. Margaret Sutter stepped into the penthouse like a lighthouse cutting through fog. She wore a navy blazer, practical heels, and carried a leather-bound folder under her arm. Her salt and pepper hair was clipped back with ruthless precision. She looked around without smiling. Mr. Ellington, she said, shaking Dwayne's hand firmly. Miss Johnson, please, Dwayne offered, motioning toward the living room. We've prepared some documents. I've read the case file. Margaret interrupted. I'm not here to read. I'm here to observe. Ovary. Her eyes swept over the room, landing on Trey, who sat at the dining table coloring quietly. And there's the little prince. Trey didn't look up. He continued to color in his tiger. Would it be all right if I spent some time with him privately? Margaret asked. Aaliyah opened her mouth, but Dwayne answered first. Only if Miss Johnson is present. That was the judge's ruling. Margaret didn't argue. She simply sat across from Trey and opened her folder. For the next hour, she asked questions. Some were simple, favorite foods, favorite toys. Others more complex. Do you feel safe here, Trey? Do you like Aaliyah? Who tucks you in at night? Trey answered in short phrases, nods, and the occasional whisper. But when Margaret asked, "Do you miss your mommy?" he froze. His crayon rolled from the table and hit the floor with a soft clack. Aaliyah moved instinctively, kneeling beside him. She didn't speak. She just sang soft, slow, the same lullaby she'd sung that first night when he climbed into her lap. Trey leaned into her shoulder. Margaret observed quietly, her pen scribbling across the page. After the session, Margaret thanked them, gave Dolores a few final instructions, and turned to Aaliyah before leaving. "I'll return in 3 days for a second observation. Be consistent," she said. "That's what children trust most." Then she was gone. That night, Aaliyah stood on the balcony, arms wrapped around herself. Snow had melted into slush along the sidewalks below. The city glittered, loud and beautiful, uncaring as ever. Dwayne joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "She didn't seem hostile," he offered. "No," Aaliyah said, but she wasn't impressed either. "We're on trial, and every smile we give is part of the evidence." He sipped quietly. "Do you regret keeping me here?" she asked. Dwayne looked at her sharply. "Not for a second." She nodded but didn't smile. "I've been thinking," she began, then hesitated. "Maybe I should find a way to get certified. Officially. So people stop seeing me as a maid who wandered into the nursery." Dwayne's eyes softened. "You think a certificate would make Victoria respect you?" "No," Aaliyah replied. "But it might make it harder for her to erase me." He was silent for a moment. "I can help. Pay for classes. Anything you need." Aaliyah shook her head. "I want to do this part on my own." He studied her, her jaw set, her eyes fierce despite the chill. Then he nodded. "I respect that." From inside, Trey's laugh rang out. The boy was watching cartoons with Dolores, who was pretending not to enjoy it. Dwayne smiled faintly. "You've built something here," he said. "Something real." Aaliyah looked back through the window. "And something real is always what gets challenged the hardest." "Okay." Later that night, while folding Trey's pajamas, Aaliyah noticed something odd. One of his picture books, The Runaway Bunny, was missing from the shelf. In its place, tucked behind the others, was a flash drive. She froze. It didn't belong to her. She hadn't seen it before. Curious and cautious, she slipped it into her pocket and waited until Trey was asleep to investigate. On her laptop, she inserted the drive. Only one file appeared. A video. She clicked it. Static. Then, Victoria's voice. "You said you wanted proof, Carlton. Here it is." The camera panned over a grainy video feed security footage of Aaliyah in the hallway of the penthouse, late at night. She was singing, holding Trey. Carlton's voice answered off-screen. "That's not enough," Victoria replied, voice colder than ice. "Keep watching." Another clip loaded. This time, it was doctored, heavily. It showed Aaliyah entering Dwayne's bedroom, then fading to black. The implication was clear, and entirely false. Aaliyah's blood ran cold. Victoria wasn't just fighting for custody. She was trying to destroy Aaliyah's credibility, and she had started planting the seeds. The next morning, the air in the penthouse felt different. Not colder, but denser, as if something invisible had slipped in overnight and settled over the walls like fog. Aaliyah moved through the kitchen on autopilot, scrambling eggs, slicing fruit, pouring orange juice. But her thoughts never left the flash drive, burning a hole in her pocket. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Not after watching that doctored footage over and over again. Not after realizing just how far Victoria was willing to go. This isn't about Trey anymore, she thought. It's about humiliation, power, erasure. Trey wandered in, rubbing his eyes, his lion tucked beneath one arm. Aaliyah crouched to hug him, forcing a calm she didn't feel into her voice. "Good morning, sweetheart. You hungry?" He nodded and climbed onto his usual stool at the island. Aaliyah served him quietly, listening for footsteps, waiting for Dwayne to wake. But when he finally did enter, hair tousled, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, she saw the stress in his eyes before he said a word. "You okay?" he asked her, voice low. "I need to show you something," she replied. "In private." "Do his ode." He glanced at Trey, then at Dolores, who gave a tiny nod, confirmation she'd keep the boy occupied. They moved into the study. Aaliyah closed the door behind them and took the flash drive from her pocket. She didn't speak, just inserted it into the desktop computer and clicked on the video. Dwayne watched in silence. First the hallway footage, then the doctored clip implying Aaliyah had snuck into his bedroom. When it ended, he didn't speak for several seconds. Then, finally, "She recorded this," he said, flatly. "Then doctored it. And left it for you to find. It was tucked behind Trey's books. She must have come in when she visited and planted it there, hoping I'd panic or that someone else would find it first." He exhaled hard, hands on his hips. "She's escalating. First the emergency petition. Now character assassination. She's going to use this in court," Aaliyah said, "to imply something improper. To make it seem like I manipulated myself into this home through—" She couldn't finish. Dwayne's voice darkened. "She wants to discredit you completely, turn you into a liability." Aaliyah looked him in the eye. "What do we do?" "We fight," he said. "And we fight clean. That's how we beat her." "I want to file a statement," Aaliyah said. "Document everything. The moment I found it, the way I've been monitored. If she's willing to manipulate video, who knows what else she's capable of." Dwayne nodded. "I'll have our legal team prep something immediately." Then he stepped forward, his voice quieter. "You shouldn't have to go through this. I knew this would get ugly," she said. "But Trey's worth it." Dwayne's eyes flicked down, then back up to hers, something unreadable in his gaze. "You're worth it too, Ibe." Later that day, the court-appointed child advocate, Margaret Sutter, returned for her second observation. Aaliyah greeted her at the door, her posture calm, her nerves wired tight beneath the surface. Margaret entered briskly, scanning the penthouse like it might have changed since her last visit. "This won't take long," she said. Aaliyah led her into the playroom, where Trey was building a tower out of foam blocks. He looked up, smiled, and waved. "Hi," with erection. It was only the second time he'd spoken directly to Margaret. She noted it with a slight nod. For the next 20 minutes, Margaret observed quietly. She asked Aaliyah a few questions about routines, educational materials, discipline techniques. Aaliyah answered them all with calm clarity. Then Margaret asked, "What are your long-term plans with the family?" Aaliyah hesitated. "Long-term?" she echoed. "Yes. If the court sides with Mr. Ellington and grants full custody, and the boy continues to bond with you, what do you see as your role?" Aaliyah folded her hands. "I see myself as a consistent presence, a caregiver, a person Trey can rely on to be there through his growth. I don't presume to know what the future holds, but I know that this child deserves love that isn't transactional." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "That's a diplomatic answer. It's also the truth." The advocate nodded and closed her folder. "You're doing well, Miss Johnson. I'll file my interim report this week." "Thank you," Aaliyah said softly. Just before she left, Margaret paused by the door. "By the way," she added, "I was contacted anonymously yesterday. Someone tried to submit a tip about misconduct implied there was something inappropriate between you and Mr. Ellington." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. Margaret glanced back at her. "I reviewed the evidence. It was poorly doctored. I've seen real cases, and this wasn't one of them." A flicker of hope pierced through Aaliyah's fear. Margaret continued, "That kind of malicious submission usually reflects poorly on the source, not the subject. But it does mean this custody battle is going to get nastier before it's over." She offered a rare, almost imperceptible smile. "Brace yourself." That evening, Aaliyah sat on the floor of Trey's room, helping him build a new puzzle. Each piece clicked into place slowly, rhythmically, just like trust, just like healing. Dolores passed by the open door, paused, then stepped inside. "You didn't hear this from me," she said, keeping her voice low, "but Victoria's people tried to contact some of the board members today. Anonymous messages, rumors. They're trying to make Dwayne look unfit. Aaliyah looked up. What kind of rumors? Implying inappropriate relationships, that he's using company funds to cover your salary, that he's distracted. Aaliyah's face tightened. She's turning this into a scandal. Dolores nodded. That's her playbook. Destroy the person, not the position. Aaliyah glanced at Trey, then back at Dolores. We need to talk to the board. You're not an employee who gets invited to board meetings. I know, Aaliyah said, but I'm the one she's trying to erase. That night, as snow began to fall again outside, Dwayne looked up from his phone to find Aaliyah in the study doorway. Tomorrow, she said, I want to speak to the board. Let them hear from me directly. He studied her for a long beat. You sure? Yes. Dwayne leaned back in his chair. Then let's change the narrative. The boardroom on the 49th floor of Ellington Holdings was nothing like the penthouse. It was colder glass, steel, and silence. The kind of silence that didn't come from peace but from wealth, power, and people who'd learned how to wield both without raising their voices. Aaliyah stood just outside the tall double doors, staring at her reflection in the mirrored glass. Pressed navy blazer, hair pulled back neatly, not a thread out of place. Beside her, Dwayne adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at her, his voice low and even. You don't have to do this. Yes, she said. I do. He gave a short nod and pushed open the doors. Inside, a long obsidian table stretched across the center of the room. 12 board members, all in suits of various shades of gray and blue, sat spaced evenly like chess pieces. Some looked curious, others looked irritated, most looked skeptical. At the far end of the table sat Derek Mullins, a founding board member and Victoria's most vocal ally. His salt and pepper hair was combed precisely, and his sharp eyes barely flicked in Aaliyah's direction before returning to the legal pad in front of him. Mr. Ellington, Derek said, this wasn't on the agenda. We have to account. It is now, Dwayne replied, his voice steady. I've invited Miss Johnson here to speak because some of you have been hearing about her without ever speaking to her. A few murmurs passed along the table. Aaliyah stepped forward. Her heart was pounding, but her feet were sure. She didn't look at Dwayne. She looked directly at the board. My name is Aaliyah Johnson, she began. I came into this house to scrub floors, not to raise a child, not to join a scandal, and definitely not to become the target of a campaign that's trying to turn my presence into a problem. The room quieted. I understand what's at stake, she continued. You represent a legacy, a family name, a business that's been carefully built over generations, and you're afraid that what you've seen in the tabloids, or heard through whispers, will hurt that legacy. Derek leaned back, folding his hands. That's a reasonable concern. It is, Aaliyah agreed. But here's another concern. When a grieving child finds comfort in someone, and that person becomes the only light in their world, is your first instinct to protect the child, or protect the name? That landed. I didn't ask for Trey to choose me, she continued. But he did. He found safety in me, and I chose to stay not for money, not for status, but because that little boy finally started smiling again. Tector 90. She reached into her bag and pulled out a drawing, crayoned figures, a stick figure lion, and a sun with the word home scribbled beneath it. Trey drew this 2 nights ago. That's him. That's me. That's Mr. Ellington. And that, she said, pointing to the small square at the bottom, is this building. Derek scoffed. Children draw a lot of things. Yes, she said, stepping closer. But they don't lie about where they feel safe. Areas. Another board member, Susan Fairbanks, in her early 60s, impeccably dressed in a gray pantsuit, leaned forward. Miss Johnson, do you intend to pursue a formal relationship with Mr. Ellington? The room stiffened. Aaliyah paused, then spoke clearly. I don't intend anything that isn't built on honesty and time. What I do intend is to keep showing up for that little boy, whether it makes headlines or not. Susan gave a slow nod. Derek interjected. Miss Johnson, what about the accusations? The footage that surfaced last week was proven to be manipulated, Dwayne cut in, his voice sharp, and submitted anonymously to smear her character. Still, Derek said, the optics are messy. If the public sees Mr. Ellington mixing business with personal matters, I'm not business, Aaliyah said. And I'm not a scandal. Her voice stayed even, but her words hit like stones. I'm a person. A woman. A caregiver. A daughter of a war veteran. A college graduate who couldn't finish her degree because my mother got sick. A worker who took the job no one else wanted. And a woman who held a broken child when no one else could reach him. She took a step forward, then another. I know what I look like. I know I don't belong in this room, at this table. But if what you want from this company is integrity, strength, and resilience, then you already have it. It's sitting at your kitchen table every morning, drawing stick figures. Oh, silence. Derek didn't speak again. Susan did. I'd like to formally request a hold on any board discussions regarding Mr. Ellington's fitness as guardian, she said. Until the court rules, we let the family heal without interference. Another member seconded. Dwayne stood. Thank you. Aaliyah gave a small nod. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered the drawing and turned to leave. In the elevator, she finally exhaled. Dwayne watched her in silence. I feel like I just walked through a war zone, she said. You did, he replied. And you won. The doors opened to the lobby. But before she stepped out, he touched her arm gently. I meant every word in court, he said. You're not going anywhere. She searched his eyes. I know, she whispered. But if I'm staying, I want it to be because I earned it, not because I'm some broken child's comfort blanket. You're not, he said. You're his anchor. Is Graptus. And yours? He hesitated, then smiled faintly. I think I'm still figuring that out. She smiled, stepping out into the marble-floored lobby, the city humming beyond the glass doors. For the first time in weeks, the fear had lessened, but the fight wasn't over yet. Victoria would come again. But now Aaliyah wasn't just surviving. She was standing. Victoria Hale did not scream. She did not break things. She did not raise her voice. Instead, when she read the board's meeting notes forwarded to her by one of her loyal allies, she merely tapped her manicured finger against her espresso cup 3 times. Slowly, each tap a warning shot. They gave her the room, she muttered to herself. Her assistant, Nora, hovered nearby. They said it was only a pause. The vote hasn't been dismissed, just delayed. Victoria's eyes didn't move from the screen. A pause is oxygen. She'll use it to root herself deeper. It nodes Zizou. She clicked to the next document, a copy of Margaret Sutter's interim report. No signs of abuse, no cause for removal. The child was emotionally stable. The caregiver showed deep investment and consistent nurturing behavior. She's winning the narrative, Victoria said softly, each word laced with ice. Do you want me to release the footage? Nora asked. Victoria looked up slowly. No, she said. That video was amateur hour. I warned Carlton not to rush it. Mark. She stood from her desk, walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window of her Fifth Avenue apartment, and stared at the skyline. No. If we're going to remove the girl, it has to be clean, impeccable. Like cutting a thread from silk, no one should even see it unravel. She paused. Set up a meeting with Anthony Connors. Tell him I have a favor to cash in. Nora blinked. The private investigator? Victoria turned, smiling sweetly. No, darling. The illusionist. Ode. Back at the penthouse, Aaliyah was kneeling beside Trey in the foyer, zipping up his little puffer jacket. It was his first day back at his preschool, a small, inclusive private center Dwayne had enrolled him in before Helena passed. He hadn't returned since the funeral. You okay? She whispered. Trey nodded slowly, but his fingers clutched tighter around her sleeve. Aaliyah leaned in, her forehead gently pressing against his. I'll be right here when you come home. You've got this. Dolores stood behind her, coat already on, ready to drive him herself. We'll go slow, she promised. If he changes his mind, we turn around. Trey reached for his lion toy, but paused and handed it to Aaliyah. Keep it safe, he whispered. Her heart squeezed. I will. As the door shut behind them, Aaliyah turned, still holding the lion, and found Dwayne watching her from the hallway. He trusts you more than anyone, he said. I know what that's worth, she said. I won't let it break. He stepped closer, his voice quieter. You're not just protecting him anymore, Aaliyah. You're protecting all of us. She hesitated. Then we need to be honest. No more waiting. What's Victoria's next move? Dwayne sighed and sat on the armrest of a nearby chair. We've locked down our accounts. She's got nothing financial to leverage, but she's got connections and they dig deep. I want to know everything, Aaliyah said. Everything she has on you, on me, what she might use. Dwayne didn't flinch. There's nothing on me that can't be explained, he said. But you? She'll go after your past. The student loan you defaulted on when your mother got sick. The 2-month gap in employment she'll claim was suspicious. The fact that you've moved 4 times in 5 years. Aaliyah's throat tightened. They're facts, but she'll twist them. She's already started, he said. A man claiming to be a former coworker was poking around your old building last week, asking questions. She nodded slowly, already feeling the walls shift. Then we get ahead of it, she said. You have a PR team. Use them. I'll talk if I have to. Dwayne hesitated. Are you sure? Aaliyah looked him in the eye. She wants to drag me into the light. Fine. Let's see how she does in it. That afternoon, a news article began circulating. Billionaires' nanny. More than meets the eye? Insidersource.com. The article stopped short of accusations but hinted at everything Victoria wanted the world to think. Inappropriate closeness, blurred roles, and the classic headline bait, the maid who became the heart of the house. Within hours, comments flooded social media, some supportive, many cruel. Aaliyah read them in silence. She's sleeping her way to the top. Another gold digger in uniform. Requiescent. If she was white, they'd call it a Cinderella story. Dwayne stormed into the room, phone in hand, clearly furious. I'm having it pulled. No, Aaliyah said calmly. Let them see. Let them show who they are. He stared at her, startled. You want the public to believe in us? She asked. Then we stop hiding. We stop managing. We live our truth, and let them deal with their own discomfort. Dwayne looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You sure you weren't born into this world? He asked. She gave him a tired smile. I was born into a tougher one. Later that night, while Aaliyah was preparing dinner, a call came through to the landline, one of the few still active in the penthouse. She answered, expecting Dolores or a delivery. Instead, a distorted voice whispered, You think you've won. But everything you've built here, it's temporary. You're a house of cards, girl. And I've got the wind in my lungs. Click. The line went dead. Aaliyah stood frozen, hand still on the receiver. Victoria had stopped whispering through lawyers and headlines. Now she was speaking directly, not with threats of court, but with promises of ruin. The next morning, Aaliyah woke to a house that felt off. She couldn't place it exactly, no doors left ajar, no obvious signs of intrusion, but the energy was wrong. Too quiet, as if the very walls were listening, waiting. She walked through the penthouse barefoot, lion toy in one hand, checking each room before Trey woke. Kitchen, empty. Office, undisturbed. But when she passed the hallway leading to the guest room where she used to sleep, something caught her eye. A hairline crack in the floorboard just near the closet door. She knelt and pried it open gently. Inside was a small, black object, the size of a coin, nestled between 2 slats of wood. A bug. Her stomach dropped. By noon, the tech security team Dwayne called in had swept the entire penthouse. They found 4 more devices, hidden in the nursery air vent, inside the base of the lamp near the kitchen, beneath the dining table. One even tucked inside a hollowed-out novel on the living room bookshelf. Professionally planted, said the lead technician, a woman named Alexa. Encrypted transmission. Audio only, but synced. Someone was listening, possibly for weeks. Dwayne swore under his breath. Aaliyah remained silent, her arms crossed tightly. Trey's room, she said. Someone was listening to him sleep. Alexa hesitated. Yes, most likely. They were alone in the study now. Aaliyah turned to Dwayne, eyes blazing. She didn't just want to monitor us, she wanted to use us. Dwayne nodded grimly. And now she has tapes. Recordings, conversations possibly out of context, edited, or worse. I want to go public, Aaliyah said. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is surveillance, harassment. Dwayne paused. Are you sure? That kind of move paints a target on you. She looked at him, voice even. There's already a target. Might as well stop ducking. At the same time, across town, Victoria sat in a dimly lit private dining room with Anthony Connors, the man Aaliyah had only heard about in whispers. He was middle-aged, wearing an impeccable three-piece suit, and twirled a gold pen between his fingers like a magician with a wand. Tell me again what you need, he said, sipping from his glass. Victoria leaned in. I need her discredited. Permanently. Not just in court everywhere. I want her name to mean nothing. So if she ever tries to speak up, no one will believe her. And the billionaire? He'll fold, Victoria said. Eventually. Or lose everything. Fighting me. Anthony raised an eyebrow. You don't want full custody, do you? Victoria didn't blink. I want control. Anthony smiled faintly. Then I'll give you smoke. Enough smoke to make even a loyal man doubt what he sees. That evening, Aaliyah stood with Dwayne in the media room as his legal team reviewed options. Her voice had just been recorded for a press statement, pre-approved by counsel. When it aired, it would be clear, concise, and devastating. A court-appointed caregiver was illegally surveilled. A grieving child's healing process was violated. This isn't just about family. It's about privacy, dignity, and the line between justice and manipulation. The next morning, it was everywhere. Aaliyah's calm voice played across national news broadcasts. Talk shows discussed it. Commentators argued about it. Some tried to question her motives. Others defended her fiercely. But one thing was clear. The tide had turned. For the first time, Victoria's shadow was beginning to shrink. That afternoon, while Trey was napping and Dolores caught up on rest, Dwayne walked Aaliyah to the rooftop garden. The late winter sun bathed the skyline in gold, the city far below still roaring with life. Do you regret any of this? He asked softly. She looked out over the horizon. No. But I regret not being ready for it. For how low people will sink. He nodded. Victoria's not done. She'll come harder, Aaliyah said. But now she has to do it in the light. They stood there for a moment, wind brushing their faces. Then Aaliyah spoke again. I want to talk to Trey. I want to tell him something's going on. That things might feel strange, but he's safe. That no matter what happens outside these walls, we're okay inside. Dwayne looked at her for a long beat. He's stronger than we think, he said. Because of you. She shook her head. Because of us. But as the day turned to night, and the house grew quiet again, something shifted once more. Aaliyah was brushing her teeth when she heard a ping from her phone. An unknown number. One message. A video. She tapped it. It was a short clip, grainy footage, like surveillance, but it wasn't from the penthouse. It showed a hospital hallway, a woman in scrubs walking quickly, a nurse, and behind her, a young woman holding a newborn in a blanket. Aaliyah blinked. The woman looked like her, and the baby. She rewound, squinted. The date in the corner read, the 10th of June, 2018. The same summer she dropped out of school. No. A message followed. There are things about you that even Dwayne doesn't know. Maybe you've forgotten, but I haven't. Aaliyah's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. Outside, New York buzzed, uncaring. Inside, secrets stirred. And Victoria had just opened a new chapter of war. Aaliyah couldn't sleep. The grainy video haunted her, running on a loop in her head like a film reel set to torment. She sat at the edge of her bed, phone in hand, replaying the clip in silence. Same hallway. Same dim hospital lights. Same woman in scrubs leading the girl with a baby. And that girl looked just like her. She'd stared so long, she could almost smell the antiseptic in the air, but she didn't remember it. Not the hospital, not the nurse, not the baby. That summer had always been a blur in her memory, filled with exhaustion, her mother's declining health, the final job she lost, and the nights she cried herself to sleep on the couch of a neighbor who let her crash for free. Did I? She whispered. Did I have a child? The question punched the air from her lungs. Aaliyah reached for the photo album she kept in her drawer. It was filled with childhood pictures, family holidays, her mother's old notes. But nothing after 2017. Just a gap. A void. A missing summer. Her phone buzzed again. Remember who you are before they crown you queen. No name, no number, just venom disguised as poetry. She didn't respond. She couldn't. The next morning, she stood in the kitchen, eyes red from lack of sleep. Dolores entered and stopped mid-step. You look pale. I didn't sleep. Dolores narrowed her eyes. You're not sick, are you? No, Aaliyah said, trying to smile. Just tired. Dolores nodded slowly but said nothing. Instead, she handed Aaliyah a cup of coffee and gave her shoulder a quick squeeze. Get some air after breakfast. You're coiled like a spring. Aaliyah nodded, grateful and aching all at once. Trey patted in moments later, rubbing his eyes. He walked straight to her, resting his cheek against her hip. Morning, sweetheart, she murmured, kissing the top of his head. He looked up at her and frowned. You look sad, she crouched. A little. But it's not your fault. You make me happy. Okay. He didn't reply, just hugged her tighter. Later that day, Aaliyah found herself walking through Riverside Park, hands deep in her coat pockets. She tried to focus on the crisp air, the rustle of dry leaves beneath her boots, the dog walkers and joggers and old couples feeding birds. But her mind was trapped in that video. She needed answers, and there was only one person left alive who might have them. Lucille Holloway, her mother's oldest friend, a retired nurse, the woman who'd helped them both during those final months. She'd moved to upstate New York after her retirement, but they'd spoken once a year like clockwork holidays and birthdays. Aaliyah found her number and called. Lucille? She asked when the woman answered. Aaliyah. Honey, I've been meaning to call you. Lucille, I need to ask you something. It's important. Lucille heard the urgency. I'm listening. Aaliyah took a breath. The summer of 2018. Was I pregnant? There was silence. Not confusion. Not denial. Just silence. A beat too long. Then Lucille's voice cracked gently through the line. I was hoping you'd never remember. Aaliyah sat down on a nearby bench, the wind hollow in her ears. So it's true, Lucille sighed. It wasn't my place to tell you. You had a breakdown after the birth. Postpartum psychosis. You were already worn thin, your mama was dying. You had no support. After the delivery, you collapsed. I made arrangements for a closed adoption at your request. Where's Nannies to the exes? I don't remember, Aaliyah whispered. I don't remember any of it. You weren't stable. You didn't even want to see the baby. You told me over and over, I can't love right now. I don't have it in me. Tears streamed silently down Aaliyah's cheeks. Lucille's voice softened. You were trying to survive. That child, he went to a good family. You told me not to contact you again about it. And I kept that promise. Until now. Aaliyah stared into the distance. Does Victoria know? I don't know how she could, unless someone accessed hospital records or tracked old legal files. It wasn't under your full name. I made sure of it. But someone found out, Aaliyah said. And they're going to use it. Lucille didn't respond. Thank you, Aaliyah whispered, for telling me the truth. I'm here if you need me, baby. No shame in surviving. Back at the penthouse, Aaliyah sat alone in the study, eyes dry now but hollow. The silence pressed in like a weight. She didn't notice Dwayne walk in. He saw her face and stopped cold. Aaliyah? She looked up. I need to tell you something. He sat beside her. Whatever it is, I'm not going anywhere. So she told him. All of it. The video. The call. The missing memory. The child. The truth. When she finished, she waited for the shift. For judgment. For the look people always gave when something didn't fit their perfect image of you. But Dwayne didn't flinch. He reached for her hand. You were 21. Alone. Hurting. You survived. That's not shame. That's strength. But they'll use it against us. They'll try, he said. But now, it's ours to own. Not theirs. Aaliyah leaned into him. For the first time in days, she let herself exhale. Do you think he's out there? My son? Dwayne didn't answer. He didn't need to, because deep down, she already knew the answer. And she also knew. Victoria had just set the final match. The fire was coming. But Aaliyah wasn't running anymore. She was walking straight into the blaze. The snow returned that night, soft and soundless, laying a blanket of quiet over Manhattan. But inside the Ellington penthouse, the storm wasn't outside, it was in Aaliyah's bloodstream. Electric, restless. The truth didn't bring her peace. It brought clarity. And clarity was a call to war. She stood in front of the bedroom mirror, watching her own reflection as if it were someone else. A woman who had given up a child to save herself. A woman who had buried that truth so deeply, she forgot it existed. And now, the world wanted her to carry shame for surviving. Not this time. Downstairs, Dwayne was on the phone with his attorney, his voice hard as iron. She knew about the sealed adoption. She used privileged hospital surveillance to expose trauma that wasn't hers to reveal. That's a felony breach of privacy if we can trace the source. He turned as Aaliyah stepped in. She wants to drag you back into the past, he said, ending the call. But what she doesn't know is, the past doesn't own you anymore. I want to find him, Aaliyah said, voice steady. Dwayne blinked. Your son? She nodded. I know. It might not change anything. I know he has a family. But I need to know he's okay. I need to know the story doesn't end with me walking away and never looking back. Dwayne didn't argue. Then I'll make the call. Quietly. Discreetly. No press. No paper trail. Endorse. She smiled faintly. Thank you. But deep inside, she knew something was already unraveling, something Victoria hadn't anticipated. Because now Aaliyah wasn't afraid to speak, and when women like her spoke, the world trembled. The next morning, the press exploded again. Exclusive. The nanny's secret baby, a past hidden in plain sight. Victoria had released the hospital video. Not the whole clip, but a cropped, slowed-down version with inflammatory captions, presented to a tabloid as concerning evidence of a mental break. The story went viral in minutes. Headlines screamed words like abandonment, unfit, unstable. But this time, Aaliyah didn't flinch. She walked into the study, turned on the camera Dwayne's PR team had set up the day before, and recorded a single-shot video. No script, no cuts, just truth. My name is Aaliyah Johnson. Yes, I gave birth to a child when I was 21. Yes, I surrendered him in a closed adoption. And no, I don't regret protecting him from the version of me that existed back then. Her voice didn't shake. I was broken. I was alone. I was surviving. And that decision saved both our lives. She paused. What I regret is not speaking about it sooner. Because silence gives power to shame, and I'm done being ashamed for being human. The video aired within an hour, and something strange happened. The narrative shifted again. Messages flooded in, from other women, from men who'd been adopted, from mothers who'd given up children and never had a chance to explain, from people who'd been judged, silenced, erased. She wasn't a scandal anymore. She was a mirror, and the world was ready to listen. But Victoria? She wasn't finished. At that exact moment, her private investigator was sitting in a rental car outside a modest brick building in Brooklyn, a daycare center. Inside, a boy, 4 years old, with curls like wildfire and skin like honey. Anthony Connors clicked a shutter, zoomed in. The boy's name was Elijah, and his adoptive parents had no idea he was being watched. He sent the image to Victoria. Seconds later, she replied. It's time she met the consequences of abandonment. Meanwhile, in the Ellington penthouse, Dwayne entered the living room holding a manila folder. I got something, he said. The agency Lucille worked with, there's a record. Your son's name is Elijah. He was adopted by a couple in Brooklyn. Same-sex parents. Stable home. School records look excellent. Aaliyah's breath hitched. Elijah. Dwayne handed her the folder. No addresses yet, but this is the start. She took it like sacred scripture. Do you want to find him now? He asked. I want to see him, she said. Just once. From a distance. Just to know he's okay. Dwayne nodded slowly. I'll make it happen. But outside, in the dark of a tinted SUV, Anthony Connors watched. He had what Victoria needed. Now it was only a matter of time before she lit the match. Because what better way to destroy a woman than to hand her what she lost, then threaten to take it again? Later that night, Aaliyah stood in Trey's room, watching him sleep. His breath slow, soft. His small hand curled around his lion's mane. She brushed his hair gently. "You don't know this," she whispered. "But you saved me from forgetting how to love." She stepped back, heart torn between the child who needed her now and the one who came before. But she didn't have to choose. Not anymore. This wasn't about guilt. It was about legacy, and she was ready to claim both. The cold wind whipped through the streets of Brooklyn as Aaliyah sat in the back seat of an unmarked black SUV, parked discreetly across from the daycare center. She wore a thick scarf wrapped high around her face, large sunglasses, and a wool coat that swallowed her frame. Next to her, Dwayne sat in silence, his hand resting gently over hers. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked again, voice low. She nodded once, eyes fixed across the street. "I won't go inside. I just want to see him. I just need to know he's real." End quote. The daycare playground buzzed with afternoon energy, children bundled in coats, chasing each other, teachers standing nearby, watching with sharp eyes. And then there he was. Aaliyah's breath caught, a little boy in a red puffer jacket, curls wild and untamed, cheeks flushed with the cold, eyes the same shape as hers. He was laughing, a sound she couldn't hear but felt anyway. He had a lion backpack. "Elijah," she whispered. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her body remained still, but everything inside her was breaking and mending at the same time. "He looks happy," Dwayne said gently. "He looks whole," Aaliyah murmured. "Like he doesn't need me. And that's the best thing I could have asked for." They watched for several more minutes. Elijah tripped over a plastic toy, fell, and scraped his knee. A teacher rushed over. He didn't cry, just pouted, then stood up and dusted himself off. "That's him," Aaliyah said through a trembling smile. "That's my son." She wiped a tear before it could fall, then turned away. "I've seen enough." "You sure?" She nodded. "I don't want to confuse him. Or his family. I just needed to see him standing, breathing, laughing." They drove away in silence. But Aaliyah didn't feel the weight she expected. There was grief, yes, but there was also peace. Back at the penthouse, a storm was brewing. Dolores met them at the door with a folded newspaper in hand and fury in her eyes. "You need to see this," she snapped. Aaliyah took the paper and unfolded it. The billionaire's nanny. Is she after his fortune, or hiding from her past? Beneath the headline was a photo of her standing outside the daycare, in that very coat, with Dwayne beside her. "This was taken today," Aaliyah said in disbelief. Who was watching us?" "They're not just watching," Dwayne growled, reading over her shoulder. "They're building a case. They're suggesting you're stalking a child, your own child." Aaliyah felt her knees weaken. She dropped the paper. "She's weaponizing motherhood," Dolores swore under her breath. "That witch won't stop until you're buried." "Then it's time we stop playing defense," Aaliyah said, straightening. "We're not hiding anymore." Hours later, Dwayne's legal team arranged an emergency strategy call. "She's positioning this as emotional instability, painting you as erratic, manipulative, potentially dangerous to Trey. She wants custody," Aaliyah said. "But she doesn't care about Trey. He's leverage." One of the lawyers nodded grimly. "And now she has another weapon. The secret baby." "It's not a secret anymore," Aaliyah snapped. "I'm not ashamed. She's the one violating privacy. That photo today, whoever took it trespassed on private time. And that boy has nothing to do with any of this. We'll file an injunction tomorrow," the lawyer promised. "We'll trace the photographer. But in the meantime, stay quiet." Aaliyah stood, shaking her head. "No, I'm done staying quiet." She turned to Dwayne. "I want to speak publicly again. But this time, not just a video. I want a live interview. National television. I'll speak my truth, start to finish. To you, Neverda." He looked at her, surprised. "That's not without risk." "I know. But we tried silence. We tried calm. Now it's time for fire." Meanwhile, across the city, Victoria stood in her private library, watching the sunset over Central Park through gold-draped windows. Anthony Connors entered quietly, holding a tablet. She went to see him, he said. Didn't try to interact, just watched. Victoria smiled faintly. So she remembers. Yes, and she didn't take the bait. But the photo leaked. The press is turning. She'll fight now, Victoria said. Harder than before, but not smarter. You want to escalate? Not yet, Victoria replied, turning back toward the window. Let her burn the match. All I have to do is show the world what she sets on fire. She walked to her liquor cabinet, poured herself a glass of sherry, and raised it. To mothers, she said coldly. And to the ones who never should have been. I.F. The next day, the Ellington PR team confirmed a spot on the Diane Clark Show, one of the most trusted talk shows in America, watched by millions, especially those over 45. It was set for Friday. Live. No script. Just Aaliyah, her story, and the full truth. Aaliyah stared at the calendar in the kitchen, heart thudding. In 3 days, she would speak in front of the entire country. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to gather strength. 3 days before the truth was no longer a weapon used against her, but one she would wield for herself. Friday came heavy and gray. The skies over Manhattan hung low, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside the green room at the Diane Clark Show, Aaliyah sat alone under soft makeup lights, hands folded tightly in her lap. The buzz of producers, assistants, and studio techs swirled around her, but none of it touched her. She was in the eye of the storm now. 5 minutes, Miss Johnson, a producer said, ducking into the room with a clipboard and nervous energy. Aaliyah nodded. The mirror in front of her reflected more than just her face. It showed her scars, her growth, her fight. She wasn't the same woman who had stepped off the subway weeks ago to mop billionaire floors. She wasn't even the woman who had once collapsed in a delivery room, broken and afraid. She was someone else now. She stood. Diane Clark sat center stage in her signature soft-toned blouse, famous for her direct but warm interviewing style. She greeted the live audience with grace, then turned to the camera. Tonight, we bring you a story that's captured the heart and fury of the nation. A young woman, once a maid, now the central caregiver of a billionaire's son. Accusations, secrets, a whirlwind of headlines. But behind it all, a human story. The music faded, and now, for the first time ever, Aaliyah Johnson speaks for herself. The crowd applauded as Aaliyah stepped into the light. She walked slowly, deliberately, and sat opposite Diane. Her pulse thundered, but her expression was calm. Diane leaned in gently. Aaliyah, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. You've become the center of a media storm. Many call you an opportunist. Others, a hero. Who are you? Aaliyah looked into the camera not as a performer, but as a woman who had run out of places to hide. I'm someone who's made mistakes. Someone who has survived things that nearly destroyed me. But above all, I am someone who will not let other people define me by a moment they didn't live through. Diane nodded. Let's talk about 2018, the child. Aaliyah inhaled deeply. I gave birth to a son when I was 21. I was alone. I was grieving. I was not well. I made a decision, one I thought would protect him from my instability. I signed him into a closed adoption, and I've never stopped thinking about him. You didn't remember? No. I buried it. Mentally, emotionally, until recently. And when the memory returned through someone else's cruel hand, I chose to face it. Diane softened. Many women watching right now understand what you just said. The pain, the silence, the cost of survival. Aaliyah's eyes misted, but she didn't cry. We punish women for enduring, for not breaking down where it's convenient. But I will not apologize for doing what I had to do to survive. Applause rippled through the audience. Diane leaned closer. And what about Trey, the boy you care for now? Aaliyah smiled. He's a miracle. A quiet soul who showed me I still had love in me. When I sing to him at night, when I watch him overcome fear, I feel like I'm healing the younger version of myself, one lullaby at a time. The audience stilled. Diane glanced down. There are allegations being whispered now about your motives. Your relationship with Mr. Ellington. Your emotional stability. Do you want to respond? Aaliyah's voice was clear. Yes. My relationship with Mr. Ellington is built on respect and shared grief. We both lost something. He lost a wife. I lost a part of my past, and in that loss, we found a way to care for Trey together. That's not scandal. That's humanity. And your mental health? I've gone to therapy. I still do. And I will not let anyone weaponize healing as weakness. The crowd applauded again. Louder this time. Diane nodded, visibly moved. Aaliyah, there's one last question. If your son ever watches this interview someday, what would you want him to know? Aaliyah turned back to the camera. Her voice was soft, but fierce. I would tell him, Elijah, if you're watching, I never forgot you. I never stopped loving you. I made the best decision I could with the broken pieces I had, but I see you now. I see you growing, laughing, whole. And I am proud of you. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Diane reached out and took her hand. Thank you, Aaliyah, for your courage and your truth. As the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation, Aaliyah looked into the crowd and saw a familiar face in the back. Lucille Holloway. She hadn't told her to come, but she was there, nodding, crying, silent witness to a truth finally spoken. Backstage, after the lights dimmed, Dwayne met her with open arms. He didn't say anything. He just held her. You did it, he whispered. No, she said, trembling with emotion. We did. But across the city, inside Victoria's penthouse, the screen flickered with the closing credits of the show. She sat perfectly still. No wine tonight, no toast, just silence. Because for the first time, she knew. This was no longer her game to control. The country had heard Aaliyah's voice, and they believed her. The morning after the interview, New York City woke up differently. It was subtle, like a shift in the wind, but it was there. In the way strangers nodded at Aaliyah on the sidewalk, in the warmth of Dolores's breakfast smile, in the messages pouring in from women, grandmothers, even veterans who had given children up for adoption after war, poverty, or shame. Aaliyah sat at the kitchen table, still in her robe, sipping coffee, her eyes raw but steady. Across from her, Dwayne read through the early data reports. Viewership hit 6.8 million last night. Top-rated interview of the year. Positive sentiment on socials is at 94%. The foundation you mentioned already received over $10,000 in donations. Aaliyah blinked. I didn't ask for donations. They just started showing up. People want to support something real. She set her cup down. How's Victoria responding? Dwayne's smile was grim. Radio silence. No public statement. But my sources say her legal team is panicking. Her reputation's taken a hit badly. You reframed the entire narrative. She has nothing left to pull that won't look desperate. She underestimated me. She underestimated your truth, he said. And people don't forget the sound of truth. That afternoon, Aaliyah sat in Trey's room, watching him build a castle with wooden blocks. He was humming a song she'd sung to him weeks ago, off-key and joyful. You made this, Dwayne said quietly behind her. This safe space. This peace. Aaliyah smiled. He's teaching me how to be brave. You taught him how to feel safe. There was a pause. Then Dwayne stepped closer. I've been thinking, he said. About Trey. About Elijah. About you. She looked up. I want us to build something real. Not just reaction. Not just defense, but a future. One where you don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Where Trey doesn't grow up watching people treat love like it's a liability. Her eyes widened. I don't know where this ends, he continued. But I know where I want it to start. With us. Together. Aaliyah didn't answer right away. She looked at Trey, at the castle rising in his tiny hands, then at Dwayne, eyes tired but honest. I want that too, she said finally. But only if we carry it with truth. All of it. No masks, he promised. No shame. Later that week, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Aaliyah opened it carefully. Inside was a photo of Elijah, a recent one, smiling with his 2 adoptive dads in a park, holding a paper airplane. On the back, in neat print, "He is loved. He is safe. We honor the woman who gave us the chance to know him." Aaliyah pressed the photo to her chest. There were no more questions, only peace. 2 months passed. Victoria Hale stepped down from the board of Ellington Industries after several quiet settlements were leaked involving NDAs and former employees. No lawsuit was filed by Aaliyah, no countersuits, no revenge. The victory was louder in its restraint. Aaliyah didn't need to destroy Victoria. She had outlived her. Spring bloomed. In a quiet ceremony in the park near the daycare, Aaliyah and Dwayne started a new nonprofit, the Whisper Foundation for single mothers facing crisis, for women told they weren't enough, for the children left in the spaces between silence. Trey ran in the grass with other kids while donors mingled. Lucille Holloway gave the opening speech, and Aaliyah stood with her son, both of them, one by her side, and one in her heart. She no longer carried shame. She carried legacy. Not all wounds are meant to be erased. Some are meant to be held, healed, and worn like armor. And now, when she sang at night, it wasn't to hush pain. It was to praise light. This story teaches us that truth is not a weakness, it is a weapon of healing. In a world quick to judge, especially women who carry invisible wounds, Aaliyah's journey reminds us that surviving is not something to be ashamed of. It is something to be honored. We are reminded that love is not about perfection, it's about showing up, even with a broken past, and that sometimes, the most powerful act of justice is to speak the truth with courage, even when others try to bury it in shame. Ultimately, the story is a testament to resilience, redemption, and the quiet but unshakable power of a woman who refuses to be erased.